To me, and I know that the Minister just mentioned it there, how important are initiatives such as the Irish Whiskey Way for you?
So for us, and I hope everyone can hear me out there, for us, yeah, it's hugely important because what it does for us is it creates a kind of a common brand and allows us as a small producer to benefit from the kind of joint marketing that we get. And what we see in the Hidden Heartlands and in the Midlands is we get a lot of people who are coming. They visit us, they visit Kilbeggan, they visit Tullamore, they might go and have a pint of Sean's Bar in Athlone, and that's a route that people can easily do as a day trip from Dublin, but also it's something where people can come and do kind of a cluster of visits. So having the Irish Whiskey Way is something, and we've been kind of piloting it over the last number of years. It's something we see our customers who come in are really appreciative of this. That this is we kind of joined up thinking, and yeah, it's great.
Yeah, very good. I suppose, Paddy, I'll pass over to you. Michael mentioned the Hidden Heartlands. Maybe explain what is the Hidden Heartlands, what is the regional approach that Fáilte Ireland is kind of taking in that sense?
Well, the Hidden Heartlands, it consists of 11 whole or part counties, about nearly a quarter of the country, and it was the fourth brand, that regional tourism brand, that was developed, and it's really an attempt to establish the Midlands as a credible visitor destination in its own right. Traditionally, it's been a place where people probably pass through on their way to on the way to their holidays to the west, but we're trying to disrupt that and trying to change that, and really building on the core assets, the heritage and culture assets, the food and drink assets, the landscape and outdoor activity assets that we have in abundance in the Midlands, and try and leverage those to create a sustainable tourism industry for the Midlands. So it's been going since 2018. It's the youngest of the brands. We've had injections of funding, such as Just Transition, over the last couple of years, really trying to build out the offering on the ground. And with the Whiskey Way, I mean, what we're seeing already is that we've got a number of fantastic distilleries like Michael's within the region, and the level of collaboration that we're already beginning to see sparking between businesses is quite inspiring. You know, businesses working together, distilleries, for example. We have one great example with the Shed Distillery in Drumshanbo that's created a bundled saleable experience with electric bike escapes in Leitrim Village, which is along what they've now called the Jackalope Trail. So we're beginning to see these innovations that are happening between distilleries and other tourism businesses as well, and starting to build out a very credible destination. And it's building it from the ground up, really, and that's what Hidden Heartlands is all about. It's about local businesses, it's about the communities, and it's about these businesses working together to cross-promote, cross-sell, and establish the Hidden Heartlands as a very credible visitor destination.
And I suppose, I mean, you talk about that cross-promotion and that cooperation. I mean, I think the initiative, obviously, the Irish Whiskey Way is 26 distilleries coming together, investing money in developing up this trail, and I think it's a great example of competitors, I suppose, helping each other out. I mean, is that something that you'd like to see, Eoin, from your point of view, looking at the overall tourism sector? Is that something that has worked, is successful, and how can we kind of ensure that we can do that more in the years to come?
Yeah, well, I think tourism is the classic example and a really good example of collaboration. And I'm with the Irish Tourism Industry Confederation, which is the sort of representative group of the industry, and it brings together everything from aviation through to accommodation, through to attractions, through to food and drink tourism providers, and so on. And we're all, if you like, pulling in the one direction. So there's an element of obviously competition when visitors are on the ground, or even when Irish people are staycationing. There's an element of competition insofar as you want to win that business. But ultimately, we have to sell Ireland first, either as a staycation destination or as a destination for international visitors to come to, and we do that really well. And it's all about collaboration. So it's about industry working together, and this is a great example. All the whiskey distilleries coming together, industry working with agencies, government pursuing pro-tourism and pro-enterprise policies, and all of it together enables a really important sector. And the thing I always say is that tourism is the largest indigenous industry in the country. It's the biggest regional employer. If you look across swathes of, for example, the Wilds Atlantic Way, myself and Alice, we're in Westport, you know, there's often tourism is the only show in town. And increasingly, I think the work that Paddy's doing and the work that, you know, the Irish Whiskey Way is doing, you'll find that places like here in Kilbeggan and Tullamore or whatever, tourism becomes elevated and becomes more important. And that's critical for the economic, if you like, livelihood in the area.
Yeah, I mean, Alice, Eoin has mentioned there the idea of selling Ireland as a concept. I suppose that's really what Tourism Ireland has to do on an international level. You're 2 years now just in the role as CEO. How are you, how have you found it? Has there been things that have surprised you? And is it a challenge, I suppose, to market Ireland abroad?
Well, I might be a little bit biased. I think it's the best job in the world, bar none. No, it's been a real privilege, and largely because of all of the incredible businesses that you get to work with, both at home and overseas. And I just want to say a huge well done to all of the distillery experiences here, because just to toot the horn for a minute for what you have collectively achieved, to be at 1 million visitors to distillery experiences, up over 20% year over year. That really shows that tourism has been good for whiskey, and whiskey has been good for tourism in the same way. And so it really helps us sell the island of Ireland overseas when we can all collaborate and come together around a big story. And whiskey is actually a big, authentic story for this island. And I remember when I first met you, Eoin, and I nearly fell off my chair because you were telling me how the first written reference to Aquavita, which became Ishkabaha, which became whiskey, was in this book in Kilkenny that you were going to try and put on show called The Red Book of Ossory, that was written in 1324, before the Black Death. That's how old it was. That's how far back distilling goes. And so that whole tumultuous history of whiskey is well rooted in our culture. And so many of the visitors who come to the distilleries, they're not just interested in tasting the whiskey, although we want them to do that as well, but it is also a history of place and of people, and it's right around the region. So we love this story, and we love working it into how we sell overseas. We ran a consumer campaign focused on this last year that was viewed, I think, 3 million times in the end. And we also then know that you sell it even better than we do. So we also love when you come overseas. And Minister Burke was with us at World Travel Market recently, and some of the distillery experiences were there too. And that was an opportunity for us to sell to tour operators who can bring visitors from across the world. So I think this really complements how we want to sell for the future.
That's great. That's great to hear. I'll send you the €20, I promise you. Mike, I suppose you guys are coming at it, I suppose, from an SME, but you're also off the beaten track. And I remember from my time, I worked in Tourism Ireland when I first graduated, and I remember that was one of the big things. Being off the beaten track was a real nice way to market a business. In reality, it does come with its challenges when you are off the beaten track. How do you tackle that? And I suppose, and you're a fledgling distillery experience, but how is it working for you, and what can we do to improve that experience for you?
Well, I suppose I'm going to question your question in the first instance, because we're in Lanesborough, County Longford. We're in the very heart of Ireland. We're absolutely in the very centre of Ireland, and so we're not in any way off the beaten track. And you know, to kind of prove that point, Centre Parks built one venue in the island of Ireland, and they built it 14-15 kilometres up the road from us in Ballymahan, because we're so central. So we're actually not off the beaten track. We're very central, and it's kind of one of the points. We're quite central when people are traversing the country.
Yeah.
So when they're going Dublin to Galway, or Dublin to Sligo, or Dublin to Westport, it's a very easy hop to divert 10 or 15 miles to come to Lanesborough. And we don't have a big visitor experience. We haven't invested a lot of money in it, and we need to. But we organically see those people coming, literally rocking up, knocking on the door, saying, "Can we come in?" Last November, I had a guy rocked up, knocked on the door. I was about to come in lunch, knocked on the door. He's from Hawaii. This guy runs high-end wine tours. He arrived back in March with about 15 people on a tour. We spent a day with them, right? We brought them out to Corry Visitor Centre. So Corry, ancient trackway dating from 148 BC. We brought them up to the local pub for lunch and a whiskey tasting. They were delighted to be in, sitting with all the local farmers in, having their lunch, because this was authentic Irish experience. And then we gave them a whiskey tasting, and you know, history of the local area and all that sort of stuff. But the authenticity was what they really loved,
Yeah.
and and that's what Hidden Heartlands really captures, and what Hidden Heartlands is all about. So when we started up our business, people said to us, "Oh, why don't you do it in Galway or Dublin or whatever?" But I'm from Lanesborough.
Yeah.
We're doing it in the centre. We're doing it where we're from, where the passion is.
And that connection, I suppose, to the authenticity of the story. Every distillery on the trail, I suppose, has its own story, and being able to share that is something that is unique to every visitor and unique to every experience. I suppose, Eoin, if we were to look at the figures, and I suppose we have to address that issue. There is a decline, I suppose, year on year in visitor numbers. Can you maybe talk a bit more about that and say, I mean, obviously we've heard that there's a plan coming out that's on. How important is that plan going forward?
Well, the plan is I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing it on Monday, and the Minister referenced it already, and I think it's going to be ambitious, and we all obviously hope it's going to be ambitious because, you know, the good news with the current government is that tourism was moved into an economic portfolio. That's why we're in Minister Burke's portfolio, and I think that's a really positive thing. And the Minister talked about KPIs and metrics and targets, and all that's a good thing. You know, and Fáilte Ireland and Tourism Ireland should sit alongside the IDA and Enterprise Ireland. You know, that's how we should think of ourselves. So I think the policy is going to be ambitious. I think it's a 5-year policy, so on. The CSO numbers at the moment for the current year are there's a little bit of confusion. We're all scratching our head a little bit because we know your visitor numbers, the Whisky Distillery numbers are up. I think they got to 20% or something, which is absolutely phenomenal. But if you read the CSO numbers, volume and value, the amount tourists spend in the country is down. And there's a misalignment between the CSO and national statistics and industry data and industry intelligence. If you talk to the hotels, if you talk to the visitor attractions, if you look at the airlines, the airport, you know, business is flat or perhaps marginally down. Nothing as good as the whiskey distilleries or visitor centres, but certainly flat or marginally down. Nothing like the double-digit decrease that the CSO is talking about. So there's a little bit of a misalignment there. So I think going forward, I think probably the Minister is aware of this, that, you know, we have to adopt other metrics as well. Yeah. So by all means we have the CSO because that's the National Statistics Agency, but we also have parallel metrics which maybe give ourselves a kind of a bigger, more holistic picture. But I think going forward, I'm a glass half full person. I'm very positive about Irish tourism. I think we have a unique Irish tourism product. As we'll tell you from all the research, it's scenery, it's culture, it's people, and to a certain extent, the distillery visitor experiences combine those three. So I think we're in a pretty good place to grow going forward.
That's great. And maybe the Minister, as I say, that plan is coming out on Monday. I'm not sure if it's still in track changes form. Maybe we can add a few things into it. I'm sure it's already all been signed off. Alice, I remember you spoke before about to talk about that. We will go on to the positives, I think, in a bit, but to talk, I suppose, about the challenges and going forward. You spoke about the 3 C's, if I remember correctly, and that was the cost, capacity, and the competitiveness of Ireland. Are those still as prominent, and do we still need to tackle them? And I suppose, as Eoin said, in the next 5 years, how do we tackle those issues?
Yeah, well, look, there's no industry, particularly at the moment, there is no industry in the world that would tell you there's no problems, there's no worries ahead. So there's always watch outs, and it's worth being nimble about those. I love that you remembered the 3 C's. Competitiveness. Look, some of those things have eased a little bit. So, for example, there was a period where the Dublin Airport cap was in place, and that was reducing the number of seats on planes. That was a constraint in capacity, but thankfully that's on hold. And so, for an example of a turnaround story, this winter we're going to have 12% more seats on planes flying to the island of Ireland than we did last winter, including 17% more from the US, 13% more from Germany, and up for Great Britain and France as well. So that's your top 4 overseas tourism markets with more seat capacity coming in. So I think that's a good example of if we can identify what the issue is and then really come together on problem solving, there are usually ways forward. And I know Minister Burke and the government are putting emphasis on competitiveness, and there have been some welcome moves, like the 9% VAT from next summer was very much welcomed by industry. The other part of competitiveness, though, by the way, is consumers overseas are worried about their finances at the moment because it's an uncertain economic environment. From our research, they are looking more closely at cost. So what that means for us in our storytelling and in what we put forward, we have to be worth it for people. So if you're not going to be the cheapest destination, you have to be a destination that people really want to come to. So we're putting a lot of thought into how do we show people that the island of Ireland is worth it, that it will be an incredibly memorable trip, that you should choose us over Iceland or Norway or wherever else. And the Irish Whiskey Way and everything that you guys are doing is very much part of that story.
I mean, Paddy, and I'm talking about it.
You know, early, and we're interested in examples of what stimulates, and just coming back to the local examples. I mean, when you look at the catalytic impact that a distillery like, you know, Michael's in Lanesborough has on regeneration in Lanesborough, it's a regeneration led by a distillery. You know, in a Hascraw, it's that regeneration is led by a distillery. In Drumshambo, it was led by a distillery. So there could be a hugely positive economic catalytic impact that distilleries can have in local communities that can then branch out from that. You know, so, and again, what we spoke about earlier was about, you know, getting other businesses then, you know, benefiting from that as well. And it gives a boost to the community, and it gives us a renewed sense of belief within a local rural community that might have been in decline for a number of years, and then is beginning to come out of that. So I'm always inspired by, you know, looking at the regenerative impact that tourism can have in local areas, and I can't underestimate the importance of distilleries for tourism in an area like Hidden Heartlands, because most of our visitor attractions are either community-based tourism enterprises, which are hugely positive, or they're publicly owned. The most important privately owned visitor attractions we have are actually distilleries, because they don't depend, you know, for their sole income on visitor revenue. They've got their whiskey sales, their gin sales as their main revenue, and they have a more sustainable foothold as a result. And then tourism is seen as an add-on. But for the local community, tourism then brings in these people, brings in this revenue that can stimulate other things to happen. So it's a really powerful model, and we're so glad that in Hidden Heartlands we have these, you know, the 5 distilleries that are within within the Whiskey Way, but right across Ireland, and you'll see the penetration that you get into very rural communities when distilleries set up, you know, and as in distillery in Kilbeggan that's been here for centuries, and has been regenerated again, you know. So that distilleries can have in rural communities is quite remarkable.
Great. I suppose for a final question, and we can try and keep it, as I say, we'll go back to the more positive aspects of it. What's one thing that gives you hope for 2026? I'll start with you, Eoin.
Well, I think Alice referenced it already. The air access picture into the country is really positive. So if you're talking, I mean, Ireland, it's self-evident, we're an island nation. There's no roads, tunnels, or bridges. So air access, and to a lesser extent sea access, is so important in terms of international visitors coming to the country. And the air access picture on North America, the US and Canada, is really, really strong. I think it's double-digit increase again for the winter months, effectively Q1, and we expect something similar in Q2. So that should mean that lots and lots of US visitors and Canadian visitors continue to come here. And I know that's a big part probably of the Irish Whiskey Way market. Now, there's an element of danger that we're becoming a little bit over-dependent or too dependent on the North American market. So I think we'd all like to see, you know, to deepen and defend and grow that North American business, but let's also bolster European business or GB business or new and emerging markets. And Tourism Ireland or Fáilte Ireland, I know, are kind of working on that. But I'm quite positive. You know, there's loads of macroeconomic and geopolitical uncertainty out there, but I'm still quite positive about the North American market next year, and I think that's very good for Irish tourism.
Great. Michael?
Yeah, so a couple of things. The first thing is, for us, it's those tourists rocking up and coming in the door and you know, being willing to spend money, and what we see is the whiskey tourists that we get in, they're people with money in their pocket that are not afraid to spend it. And you might be hearing a different thing when you go out and try and sell product in certain European markets, that the market is down, the market is depressed. But the people that are coming in to the door to visit a whiskey distillery, they're pre-qualified. They're people who like whiskey and they're prepared to spend money on it. And I'm sure we see that. I'm sure they see the same in Clonakilty and in Ardara and in Skellig, 618 down in Kerry, and all across the country, and here in Kilbeggan as well. And you know, one of the things that we do when we send out a product in a bottle, we're sending out an advert for our place where the distillery is. So we're not just the distillery as a tourism business. We're actually, the product is an ad for the tourism business that the distillery is. So that brings people into the area, and we've had people from, like, we literally have had people from Singapore, Tasmania, Hawaii, even some Indians recently,
Huge market.
multiple states in the US, a lot of Europeans. The people are there, the people are coming, they're whiskey tourists, and they're coming because, they're interested in whiskey, they've either heard about us, they've heard of the Irish whiskey way, they've picked up on us that way, and so that gives us hope, because it's you hear this doom and gloom when you see certain media outlets pick up on a lot of doom and gloom
None
about
of the ones
whiskey.
that are in this room. Just
But there is, it's a fact. It's something that's out there, and but for us, there are people out there who like whiskey, who like good whiskey, who are prepared to spend money on it, and they're kind of our target customer, and tourism is an enabler in that, and a benefit of that as well, with the bottles going out. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Very good. Alice, same question of you.
Yeah, well, look, structurally, very much agree air access is vital, and very grateful for some of the support from government for market diversification. So there's a market diversification plan across trade generally, but within tourism, what that will mean in practice is a strategic air access fund to start scoping out inspiring demand for long haul routes from new destinations, so maybe bringing you a few more of those visitors from further afield. And then also doubling down and increasing investments in some of the growth markets that we have, like Canada. I mean, revenue from Canada grew over 30% from 2023 to 2024, and this year we again increased access, with anecdotes around planes that were taking Canadians to the US actually now bringing them to Europe and ideally Ireland. So there are pockets of growth and long-term markets that we can invest in. Mainland Europe is another area to double down, because it's a close-to-home region with sort of over 400 million high-earning individuals who we could encourage to come to Ireland. So I think excited about market diversification, but truly I always take huge inspiration from people like you in this room. So all of the small businesses who are out there innovating, and we've just come from the Adventure Tourism Conference, and exactly like the distilleries, there's just incredibly smart, brave entrepreneurs who are off in rural Ireland setting up wonderful experiences for tourists. So now it's just about making sure the structures are there to bring those visitors in.
One little minor thing.
Oh, yeah, go on.
Just something you said reminded me of it. The removal of the ban on liquids in Dublin Airport is something that gives me hope, because it's an objection to people buying bottles. So now they can buy a bottle of whiskey and bring it with them. Now you've no excuse. The fact that you can't sell them a bottle is the fact that you're not able to sell, as opposed to the fact that they don't want to bring liquids. But that has made a huge impact.
Yeah, and it's a small change like that.
Small
that the
change,
government can make.
small
that can have a huge
little
impact.
incremental changes can have a huge impact, positively or negatively.
Yeah.
But these things have good.
But Paddy, I hope that the removal of that ban wasn't what you picked for your hope for 2026.
No, my hope for 2026 is to see. I think the new policy coming on Monday.
I was waiting for someone to say
It's going to be
it.
great. That's
best in class.
I think we're really optimistic about what's coming out in that. And from a Hidden Heartlands perspective, I'd love to see what we've started, kind of continue to grow and accelerate, and getting more visitors into the wonderful Hidden Heartlands.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.